Now, as we discuss a development that is towards modern Indian constitution. So, in that we discuss in previous lecture, it is actually sort of historical lecture. So, history lecture. So, at that time we discuss about regulating acts, its India Act, and then Charter Act. Now we are focusing on Charter Act only, that is of 1853. Now here a remarkable development is already carried out by Britishers. Almost all India is under their control now, and therefore now it was a matter of time that how long company will allow to keep the possessions in their hand, because already in the parliament some strategies were going to get full control over India. See, we have discussed in earlier lecture. I am just revising that after American War of Independence, the British Parliament lost control over America, that is USA. Now, and now then not ready that again history should get repeated. And so they started curtailing East India Company. Now here, the important thing that they imposed various act. Say we have discussed that in earlier lecture. And now the way British East India Company was taking power from Indian princely states, or rather I should say Indian rulers, in their hand, there means British East India Company's hand. Almost similar tactics were used by British Parliament now. Now see, 1853 Act, the Charter of 1833 was renewed. We are aware that from earlier date also they renewed the Charter, that is for 20 years. But now in 1853 they said that Charter is renewed not for 20 years, but company was allowed to retain the Indian possessions in trust for Her Majesty, her heirs and successors until Parliament shall otherwise provide. So, this is now full preparation by Parliament to get complete control in their hands, only the matter of time. And therefore, the questions are so many in our mind. Say for example, whether that 1857 revolt was intended by British Parliament only. We are saying it is a national freedom struggle, the first national freedom struggle. But really it was only first national freedom struggle, or an attempt by British Parliament to take control of India. We don't know. Let us forget this topic for history. But these were the important things. Now, it also provided the separation of executive and legislative functions of Governor General's Council by adding new members to legislative purpose. Now, companies' control over appointment of their servant, they are also now taken out. For that purpose, competitive examinations were introduced, and so civil services, that Indian civil services, that was now started here through competitive exam. So like that, things were controlled. You are aware that in earlier days also competitive exams were there, but recommendation from at least one member of director of that company's board was mandatory in order to get ready for that exam. Now, this is some important features of 1853. And then there was a remarkable incident in India, that is, we are calling as India's first national freedom struggle. Whereas Britishers, they called it as a mutiny of sepoy or revolt of sepoy. But various reasons were there. But after that, this was we can consider that this was a masterpiece carried out by British Parliament, because they sent their army now, European army. Say, there was British army in India, but that was maintained by British East India Company. So rather I should say, instead of British army, I should say it is company's army. And now British, that means European British army arrived in India. And the revolt, or say that freedom struggle, was reversed out. And therefore, now the possessions were in hands of British Parliament. And that's why the Indian Council Act, Government of India Act of 1858 was now given. Now here, important thing that was carried out, that Governor General of India, that post was changed to Viceroy of India. Already British, prior to British only, like Portuguese rulers, they were using also similar kind of term, that Viceroy. So they were calling something Viceroy. So that is similar sounding word. So here they introduce a concept that is, instead of Governor General, a Viceroy. Now earlier days, the Governor General was answerable to two people, whereas here they made it one person. That means Secretary of State. So this is change of dual answership to single answership. So this is important thing. Viceroy's Council was now having 15 members. 7 of them would be selected from that company's director board. So like that, some important things were carried out, and this way smoothly we can say, for Britishers, Parliament was able to take over control over India. It was almost company, that British East India Company, the enthusiasm with which they started, and they prepare their empire cunningly, what we can say wisely, or whatever the words we can use. That entire empire was now there in hands of British Parliament. The same way they behave with Indian rulers, that means British East India Company, the same way now Parliament behave with them, and ultimately the control of this India, that government was there in hands of British government. Now, henceforth, we are now discussing the amendment or whatever the things they were carried out by British Parliament. Now here onwards, various reforms were given to Indians, and gradually we developed, according to them. I am not saying we developed, because we were already developed, but according to them, we developed our democratic approach, or rather I should say Western democratic approach, and that was developed step by step. So in next lecture we are going to discuss this.